Have either of you read The Love Hypothesis?
Yeah.
I think we talked about it on one of the podcasts.
There's a quote from that book that I have in my phone because...
Wait, did you like it, Chandler? Because Vicky and I have varying takes. I think we agree on the basic, like, we don't like what it's representing of academia. Just Vicky, you enjoyed it as more of like a fluff romance, while I was much hardline. Like, I could not get to the enjoyment part because it was so cringy.
For me, it was mostly that I had such a horrible relationship with my PI, I could not fathom why anyone would want to kiss their PI. Yeah, that was mostly...
All the power imbalances, that's what I think's like the really messed up part. Like, they control so much of your life in academia.
Yes, but there's a quote in here that I have never agreed with more, which is, in academia, every position above the graduate student level requires some degree of assness in order to be held for any period of time, with tenured faculty at the very peak of the ass pyramid.
I love that you went through the effort of having that as a note.
I felt very, very validated by those two sentences when I read them the first time.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to Reforming Academia, episode unknown. It's been a lot of them this season. Here I am, Vicky.
Chloe, today we have special guest, drumroll please, Chandler! Thanks so much for joining us, Chandler. Let's just dive right in. Can you tell us a bit, let's just start with your current role. Tell us what you're currently doing.
So currently I am teaching faculty, two adjunct positions, one at Alverno College and one at my alma mater, Carroll University, in the Milwaukee area in Wisconsin.
Incredible. So, a bit of context, how Vicky and I both know Chandler is we're all in the SciComm space together. I think we started our PhDs roughly at the same time, right? Like 2018?
Mm-hmm.
We were all on the science communication Instagram world before the pandemic, which I think is a pretty small niche, honestly. Like, a lot of people came on after the pandemic.
Pre-COVID, it was a very small niche, yes.
Yeah, it was.
So that's how we all know each other. And Chandler's in Wisconsin, so we've actually had the chance to meet when I've been up at my alma mater, University of Wisconsin-Madison. But the goal of having Chandler on today is, gosh, I didn't think of the name ahead of time. Are we calling it like a proof of concept or example and a showcase of...
You can call me a longitudinal study. I'm okay with that.
So the reason we have Chandler on today is, besides knowing her and being friends with her for years in SciComm, she's also a really good longitudinal study example of how we can actually do reform in academia from within. So Chandler, you were a PhD student before you decided to do all this tenure track pathway. Maybe a lot of people, we lose them halfway through grad school because they're like, I can't keep with this publish and perish culture. I don't want to do research necessarily anymore. And you're in a unique position that you are able to do the tenure track pathway, but you aren't worrying about the publish or perish culture. Maybe let's start there. Could you share a little bit about what that means?
So I am solely applying and have now committed to a full-time professor position for next year. And it's solely based on I was only wanting an instructional faculty position. So there's kind of a new trend in PUIs, primarily undergraduate institutions, where they have instructional faculty that can go for tenure track, and then they have research faculty that can go for tenure track. So either you do a small research project and teach classes, or your sole focus is your students and your curriculum. And I opted for the second option because I feel like if I am spending any time on research, which A, I realized I didn't really like in the first place, but B, even if I did, I don't think that I would be able to be there for my students in the way that I would want to be.
And for people who aren't familiar, maybe perhaps with the different sorts of tenure track that you're doing, because to be frank, I didn't even know this until halfway through grad school, what it means where you, like, I guess I'm kind of spoiling it here, so maybe you're going to have to figure out a better way to say it, but like how something you have to do research and teach at the same time as a professor, and then other schools you have those different tracks.
So it completely depends on, usually, like, it can be size of school, it can be type of school, it can be type of program. Entirely depends. Like UW-Madison has awesome instructional faculty that only teach, but then not every Big Ten school has programs like that, to my knowledge. So there's a lot of variability.
Yeah, UW-Madison, I know this was, because I remember this from my organic chemistry class, you can have professors that just teach, but you can't have professors that just do research. And this was something I remember because my organic chemistry professor, going to sorry, I get so angry thinking about this. He was some German professor who'd come for a sabbatical for a year at UW-Madison, world-renowned research institute, super excited about doing his I don't know, oil, organic chemistry stuff. And he shows up and he finds out that he's required to teach the intro organic chemistry in addition to his research. And he shows up day one, and literally tells us, I don't want to be here. I didn't think I had to teach anything. I don't plan on teaching you any of this basic organic chemistry stuff because I think it's boring. He spent the whole semester teaching us about his oil, I don't know, his own research. So for the first test, because there were, I don't know, like 3 midterms or whatever throughout the semester, those were not written by him. Those were written by like the high up OChem people because there were so many classes that different professors were teaching the different like basic OChem classes. And so what that meant is when our class of 300 people that had been taught by this German professor and we've been learning all about oil organic chemistry, we show up to the test and there's nothing to do with this oil organic chemistry we've been talking about. Instead, all the basics, which we should have learned and hadn't. It was miserable. I think the average on that test was like 30% or something. And then they realized that they really had to step in. I don't remember what happened there. I'm impressed I passed that class. But I mean, that's a really good example of why you should have teachers or professors that actually want to teach allowed to do just teaching without the research.
Are an expert in a subject does not mean that you are good at communicating it to other people. Those are two entirely separate skills, and I wish the academic job market treated them as separate skills.
Just wanted to chime in during my PhD. My chemistry department, so like most of the Gen Chem courses were only taught by educational staff. Like so there were none of them were doing research, so it was all just professors that were fully hired to teach Gen Chem. And what I liked a lot about my undergrad university was that my PhD university, same place, is that they also did a lot of educational research. So if I were to only consider doing research, would be going into educational STEM like research. So it's also a big up and coming field where you're not just teaching, but you're also doing STEM educational research. Just how can we improve the classroom setting and in general STEM education to kind of drive that gap potentially. So like I know in my undergrad universities that they reformed all the chemistry courses and all the math courses, and due to this educational research and the averages in general have gotten up, like the students are performing much better and they're learning a lot more. So if that would be the only case where I would consider potentially doing research and teaching at the same time.
That's more important than ever, talking about STEM education research, especially talking about the current federal funding climate. I don't know if you guys saw the latest, oh gosh, it was the fiscal 2027. The president just released his proposed budget for next year. And they cut, among many things that they propose cutting in STEM, they propose cutting all of NASA's science education budget, which is like, I think it's like 41 million or something. Yeah, crazy. Especially thinking like context wise, this came out like 2 days after Artemis 2 launched. Mind-boggling. But goes back to like the importance of when you have that STEM education research happening, you're able to make true reform into the classes that the undergrads are taking, which is where you're losing so many potential researchers in that pipeline. And now, okay, Chandler, going back to your experience here, what made you, I guess we've already covered why you wanted to leave the research, maybe. You're like, that wasn't my cup of tea, that part. But when did you figure out that you could do specifically that teaching track? And then how did you think that, okay, I could actually start applying for those jobs?
Okay, so I realized very early on in grad school that I was a black sheep because I solely was doing a PhD for the purpose of being a college instructor. I never intended to work in the lab full time. That also made me very unpopular when my committee found out that that was the case. I was definitely fed the narrative that like teaching is an inferior choice and that I'm like not a quote unquote real scientist because I'm not picking up a pipette every day.
But
So
there's
even
now PhDs that are going to be mainly catered for STEM education. So there's a
Yup, I
whole.
wish that I had known about STEM ed research or any of that before I went on this path. I had no clue that that was even a thing.
up and coming when we were doing the PhD. I remember talking to you about this is because I know because I went to those conferences and there's a lot of now up and coming PhD programs that are only catered for STEM education and going into the education field.
But also, I mean, just to like, because with how, I don't know, archaic, the or old-fashioned current academic standards are, I'll be curious. I think it's awesome that people are doing those programs, and I'm all for it, but I could definitely see the older guard of academia, like, if you're applying for jobs, they're gonna want more of, like, someone who's had a research background, like a biochemistry PhD, and maybe not weigh the STEM education PhDs as much, which is not fair, especially when you're talking about getting the experiences to become a teaching professor versus a research
Exactly
professor.
that. Just because they're offered by universities doesn't mean that they're valued the same by employers.
I think the issue into when you're trying to get like academic position is that they're like, well, you're inexperienced, you're a researcher, you cannot teach if you're going for full-time teaching positions. They're like, you don't have sufficient enough experience in teaching and leading the classroom. So this runs into an issue. It's like, well, yeah, I have a PhD in biochemistry and I know all these topics, but they don't want to hire me because I just haven't taught a lot of these courses. That's what leads to a lot of after PhD, you end up being an adjunct is to build up that experience that you now need in order to get some of these teaching jobs.
I'm going to drop some Chandler lore here on this one. So, when I interviewed for graduate school, I was down to between two schools. One of them had an undergraduate population, and the other one didn't, which is where I ended up going. However, I chose that school because they told me that I could adjunct at my alma mater, um, like once a week at night for like a bio or a chemistry lab or whatever. And they told me that when I interviewed. They're like, we know we don't have we don't have undergrads to have you practice teaching in like a TA kind of setting, but like here's the kind of opportunity you could have. Turns out I was lied to because I got to grad school and then I was told that, oh yeah, you can do that, but your PI has to approve it, and my PI said no and kept saying no until well, he's not going to watch this. I did it anyway, behind his back, for a year and a half. Because, and he never found out, to my knowledge, because I was literally just so desperate to get, like, the professional development that I needed for the direction I knew I wanted to go instead of the direction that he was trying to force me. And I'm so glad I did that because if I didn't, I don't think I would have gotten a full time job this cycle. But I've been in classes since 2023 on my CV.
That was gonna lead to my next question is, what experiences did you get to be able to set yourself apart? It sounds like it was that, being
It
able to
was
TA.
that. It was that, and that I got to teach a variety of classes, right? So, like, the beauty of being a biochemist is that I could teach biology flavored things and chemistry flavored things. So, between the two schools, I have taught intro bio, microbiology for like nursing students, intro chemistry lab, genetics, A&P. Like, I've gotten a really wide like variety of different stuff, which I think really like one strengthened my application, but two just made it possible for me to apply to more different jobs. Like what Vicky was saying about, she's like, well, I don't really want to teach chemistry, so I'm narrowing down to like biology, but I also don't want to be stuck teaching the same biology class for 20 years. And like getting that variety, right? So I at least had like a few more options to apply to as a result of my variety in my CV.
So what about for people, I imagine, that are listening to this and hearing you have done all these different sorts of science teachings, but your expertise is biochemistry. How did you prepare yourself to be able to teach all those different sorts of classes?
So, fun fact, I never actually took college level anatomy, just phys. So I have had to teach myself the anatomy, which is fun for me. And also I think it makes me a better teacher because I just learned it. So how did it make sense to me or how did it stick in my brain? And that almost gives me an advantage because instead of something that I learned 10, 15 years ago that is not as fresh anymore, that learning something brand new and then passing it along immediately is almost better. My PhD just gives me the ability to problem solve and like think through science faster because I know how to learn science faster. So like even if it's a brand new topic to me, I can learn it faster from Googling than my student can because I've just done it more times.
That is literally what I say one of the best skills you get from your PhD is how to learn efficiently,
Yes.
with new information.
Yeah, which is what when I went into a lot of the adjunct positions that I had, some of the stuff, like some of the topics covered, I've never learned them, or it's been forever since like this semester I was teaching photosynthesis, and I had to like reteach myself all of photosynthesis because I'm like, last time I seen photosynthesis was in undergrad. I'm
Wait,
like,
what the
this
heck's
was
Rubisco again?
so I had to really learn, but because I have a PhD, I can efficiently learn a topic in a short amount of time and teach it to someone, which is an acquired skill that you get through PhD. But I think that's what I'm saying. That's why I want a position that's going to be uh more variety of biology courses. Like I don't want to teach the same thing. It also gives you an opportunity to learn a lot of the stuff, but it's knowing how to think a lot of the times to apply yourself when you're applying for a lot of the positions, even for the adjunct positions. It's a thing learning how to sell yourself and saying that, hey, I might be a biochemist, but I can sure teach intro to neuroscience.
Hmm.
I also feel like we should address the elephant in the room, which these days it is hard to get an academic job. So maybe, Chandler, do you want to touch on is how the process has been for you in terms of trying to stay in academia, and maybe also including that like advice for people listening and do want to stay in academia.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's rough out there. I'm extremely grateful for where I am right now. But here's kind of a rundown of what my experience has been. When I graduated with my PhD in November of 24, I started the spring semester adjuncting so wonderfully. My alma mater had openings, and I just contacted my old advisors directly. And I was like, hey, I want to teach. And they're like, great, we really need you and we trust you because we already know you. So, like, connections are fantastic if that's not an option for you. I did apply to the Alverno position from a job board that was posted at my graduate school. They were looking for someone to teach a cell biology course, and it happened to like align with my graduation time, and so I applied. And then I had a Zoom interview. It was like 3 days before my defense. Like, I didn't know if I was going to have employment after I was done. I was so scared that week. It was also the week of the election. So,
That's a bad week overall.
oh, first week in November 2024 was rough for Chandler. Uh, Made it through. But yeah, so I interviewed there, and I was in the midst of like defense, right? Probably the crappiest I felt about myself. Felt like I didn't know anything. I was so demoralized. I was so beaten down after so many years of like basically having my opinion not matter. And having a person with an education mindset interview me, and it made me feel like I was capable, and I had never even met this person, and I was like, whoa. It was wonderful, but it felt very foreign to me.
That also ties in well. I mean, the theme of the whole podcast. Oh, actually, an aside because you just pulled it up. We all have our
Tea.
tea out with us. Tea. Maybe we should say mine's Yorkshire. I'm basic Yorkshire black tea. Vicky, what you have?
I'm pretty sure I'm just drinking some type of green tea.
It's from China, right?
No, I think this one's local. Um, but I just literally pulled out whatever was first grabs in the cabinet.
Fair and Chandler.
I have chai latte. I get free access to cappuccino machine at Carroll Cafeteria.
The goal of podcast Reforming Academia is to talk about the ways that academia can improve or reform. So, based on, I mean, you're kind of touching on it a bit of your grad school experience versus now. What is kind of the mindset or maybe pieces of wisdom that you're taking into your teaching to try to reform academia?
Yep. So there were many times where I just really wanted to leave because of how I was being treated. And now that I'm on the other side of it, it's both a little demoralizing, but like also kind of hopeful. And what I mean by that is now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm realizing, like, you know what? It's really not that hard to make sure that my students don't suffer instead of making sure that they suffer like I did. Like, it's really not that hard.
You don't need to
And so,
repeat the
like, that,
cycle.
yeah, like, it's really not that hard to just, like, care about your students as humans. I don't know.
Hot
Um,
take.
yeah. Shocking, right? Have either of you read The Love Hypothesis?
Yeah.
I think we talked about it on
Okay.
before one of the
There's
podcasts.
there's a quote from that book that I have in my phone
Wait, did you
because
like it, Chandler? Because Vicky and I have varying takes. I think we agree on the basic, like, we don't like what it's representing of academia. Just Vicky, you enjoyed it as more of like a fluff romance, while I was much hardline. Like, I could not get to the enjoyment part because it was so cringy.
for me it was mostly that I had such a horrible relationship with my PI. I could not fathom why anyone would want to kiss their PI. Yeah, that was
All the
mostly
power
the
imbalances. That's what's I think's like the really messed up part. Like, they control so much of your life in academia.
Yes, but there's a quote in here that I have never agreed with more, which is in academia, every position above the graduate student level requires some degree of assness in order to be held for any period of time, with tenured faculty at the very peak of the ass pyramid.
I love that you went through the effort of having that as a note.
I felt very, very validated by those two sentences when I read them the first time. So things that I make sure that I do as an instructor, I literally just try to remember what I needed and wanted when I was an undergrad student. So clear expectations, learning objectives at the beginning of the PowerPoint that tells them what they are responsible for knowing. I also provide practice exams so that they're not worrying about the length of the exam, the format of the exam, and instead they're focusing on actually knowing the material instead of being anxious about the test itself. Um, and just like also being available, not being judgmental when people get things wrong, because getting things wrong is a part of learning. And like the number of times that I was shamed for being wrong when in reality I should have been encouraged or supported. Those are all things that I am actively, I just rewind my brain 10 to 15 years and I'm like, what would undergraduate Chan have wanted? And that's what I try to do.
Chime in to give an advice before it leaves my head is that also for anyone that is in the PhD program and wants to go into an educational field, there are pedagogical courses that a lot of universities offer. That is becoming like a new thing. Like I taken a pedagogical course when I was an undergrad myself, and I was going into like essentially teaching courses, and it was kind of required in my school to take a pedagogical course in order to teach some of the classrooms. And now in New York, I was offered also to take a pedagogical course for free, and it's a really great experience because it breaks it down all the things that you just mentioned. Chandler was just talking about how do you structure your classroom, how do you design not just your classroom but your online platform, right? We're talking about Canvas and Blackboard. How do you take into account disabilities and making sure that it is all accessible to students? Also, how do you properly design exams, make sure it's inclusive? How do you receive feedback? So, for example, a lot of the times in my classrooms, I will ask students how they felt about the exam. One of the questions when they come back from an exam is that I ask them how they felt, what had helped them prepare for the exam, so I can prepare, like, make sure that I implement some of those things. And also making sure that I understand where the students stand in the classroom, kind of like, hey, like not waiting until the end of the semester to read my students' comments, but asking them in the middle of like classroom, like, hey, give me feedback now so I can make changes right now if they're needed. And not all of that came from a lot of the times from the pedagogical course that I'm taking.
Did you have classes like that too, Chandler?
I have not taken a single teaching course. In fact, I have been actively discouraged from it every single step of the way. I have been told that it is not important and that I should focus on what's, quote, actually important, which is research. So, everything that I know about teaching, I have had to go out of my way to my old profs to get mentoring or find it myself, or it's just self taught.
That's sad. But okay, let's try to go more in a positive spin here because that was really depressing.
Yep.
Like, it's good for Vicky having these courses. Does your
Yeah, it's
school?
just
Yeah.
because, like I said, like it's like some of like, for example, like top of the like bigger universities will offer pedagogical courses where you're not paying for them, and they're going to be covered like for free. And sometimes, like for my undergrad, I got a credit for it, like it counted towards my graduation, but I didn't really have to pay for it. It was a part of a program. And now here, when I went into teaching, because I'll be teaching some summer courses in Columbia during the summer. It was offered to me as a part of like, hey, you're going to be teaching for us. It's not mandatory, but if you would like, and I was like, sure, why not? And we actually
Mhm.
have like homework assignments and we have like case scenarios and we meet like once every week on Zoom and we get like a little case scenario like this has happened in your classroom. How do you handle this type of situation? What did the instructor do wrong? What could the student then have this approach? And then we all discuss it like as a group, how it could have been approached. A lot of the stuff is hard to apply to STEM because a lot of it is more geared towards education in general, but I find like it still can be useful. Like a lot of the material I found very useful, especially talking about like being inclusive and taking account into like disabilities and which format do you upload your for example, are you uploading PowerPoints or you're uploading PDFs? Because PDFs are easier for students to read that are potentially have like disabilities with like hearing or um seeing. It's easier for them to download a PDF file and get it read through rather than having a PowerPoint file. Like things that I would never think of were taught to me in the pedagogical course.
Thought the PowerPoint would have been the better one because it would be like the raw for
It doesn't dictate the
interesting.
same way.
And so, Chandler, would it sounds like your university doesn't offer anything like that. Would you be taking like I guess if these were offered to you though, would you be interested in taking them?
Absolutely. I went to a wonderful session called Teaching the Table at the National ACS meeting and learned from other AP chemistry and college chemistry instructors on like what they're doing that's working well. It was amazing.
I do have to say
Um,
ACS really does seem to be leading the way in terms oh sorry, ACS, the acronym for people who don't know, so the American Chemical Society. They're like I mean, they're one of the biggest science societies in the country, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that it's global. There were over 12,000 chemists from all over the world at that conference.
But what's really cool about ACS, I think, is that they take because I've even seen they're trying to do like social media initiative. They're really working on changing the definition of a chemist, but more broadly to scientist, where it's beyond this like specific box of academic researcher. I really think it's going to be up to a lot of science societies down the road. Like they have a lot of funding, but they're mm, traditionally I feel like they're very stuck in their ways, archaic. Like science conferences, they're very like you go, you present a poster, X, Y, Z. You're going there to find an academic position. Well, having other sessions, say like what you said, where you've got a session where you can just go learn from other teaching professors on how to improve teaching. Like other ones, again, I think I've heard at ACS they have like science policy and other like career options that you can go explore.
Yeah, I went to a chemistry education poster session that had over 100 professors talking about how to best communicate chemistry to majors
That's
and
I
non-majors. It
saw that on
was
your
so awesome.
story. It looked really cool.
It was so
Yeah.
awesome. It was so awesome. And
So
like,
my PhD program, we had a chemistry education program. So there are some PhDs that are getting their PhDs in chem ed, and a lot of them go to those conferences. And I've been myself to the ACS and presented for the chem ed because when I was an undergrad, I was a part of like chemistry society. So we presented as a part of the chem ed and showing how we were I guess being engaged in like a community and communicating science. I've also went in my PhD because I was so involved in the chemistry department. I actually got to go to like one of those teaching conferences, just like how do you implement like active learning conferences. So we talked a lot about like how do we make our classrooms more interactive. And I don't know if you Chandler have any TAs or LAs in your classrooms?
111 students to myself with no TAs between two schools right now as an adjunct.
I know that for like cuz in New York I was like, wow, when you have money, it's so nice because I have right now, well, I am teaching a classroom with like over 60 students in there. And I get to have a graduate TA and I get to have two undergraduate TA. And then we have like an assistant TA that manages all the makeups, makes sure like all my exams are printed, does like all the administrative work. I don't do any makeups. Like I just tell them, hey, shoot an email to this person. They will arrange a makeup for you. Um,
Yeah. Meanwhile, I have in 10 minutes, microbiology lecture starts for nursing students, and I have 60 in there, and that's completely me. All me, just me.
the help with the prep life-changing. I still grade all the exams myself because I think it's fair. Like, I don't want to split it up because there will be grading discrepancies, and I don't want that for the students. So I grade all the exams myself, but like my TA will grade some of the assignments that I've assigned, like on Canvas. She will go in and grade. It's like 4 assignments for the whole semester that she'll grade, and they help proctor my exams, and they have their own office hours. So all my 3 TAs have extra office hours because I can only have so many office hours in the week, but it's 60 students, and there's a high possibility not like a lot of them cannot make it during my office hours. So they have the option of going to the TA's office hours. And at the other university I teach in, I have a learning assistant. But I was lucky because one of the professors that usually has her does not teach that class this semester, and they reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to have a learning assistant. I was like, yes, please. Thank you.
New job at the Tech County. So I got my new job is at Waukesha County Technical College, and that starts for the fall semester in August. They cap their class sizes at 24.
Yeah, that's at the university I teach at here in Connecticut.
Have combined lecture and lab. So for example, when I'm teaching anatomy and physiology in the fall, I have 24 students and I can go back and forth between lecture and lab activity as much as I want within the 2.5-hour time period.
Most of how I learn is hands-on in STEM. I mean, learn hands-on in general, but especially in STEM, like things don't click for me if I'm being told to read out of a textbook. I need to see it, do it, like experience it. That's cool.
Yep. And they have something called a science center where so they have classes Monday through Thursday, so 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. whenever there's classes offered. All the time there is a science faculty member sitting in the science center. You can walk in at any time that the school is open and go get help from science faculty whenever you want. I have a list of things that either I have heard or have been said to me in my academic experience. Would you like me to share a couple?
This is the Chandler special Spill the Tea with firsthand
Excellent.
experience during academia grad school.
Okay, sentences that either I heard directed at me or at one of my friends. I haven't seen my family in years either, and you don't see me complaining about it. Dinner with your significant other is something that you'll need to sacrifice for the sake of your PhD. I know you're in therapy, but when is it going to start working so that you can finish XYZ experiment? You want time off? Work through the holiday to earn it. And I was talking about adopting my brand new cat, and my PI told me that I should maybe hold off on adopting a cat during my PhD, so I'm not just.
I mean, that's crazy because one of our previous episodes, Vicky and I were talking about how people say not to have babies during grad school, but a cat, that's like an emotional support animal.
Yeah, and anyone who knows me or follows me on Instagram knows that Cooper, my black cat, is like half the reason I'm alive. So yeah.
I mean, same. My cat's got me through grad school. I got my first one during the pandemic, and then the second one, like, while I was probably like the worst part of my PhD right at the end.
Yep.
Vicky has a cat too.
And now I'm in an environment where teaching is prioritized and people trust me to do a good job and like actually listen to my opinion, and I'm still getting used to it, and it's wonderful. It does get better. It can get better.
All right, and on that bombshell, it can get better. Chandler, thank you so much for joining us. This is Reforming Academia with your hosts, Chloe and Vicky, and we'll see you guys again soon. Bye.
Science is for everyone.